Hello, everyone. Good to see you. As always, I'm trying to figure out am I live or what? And here I am. Hello, and welcome to everyone to Coffee, Kegs, and Kriegsspiel. I can't quite see my whole lighting situation. It's kind of odd. We're getting into summer now. It's May the 1st of 2022. And I got the sun pouring in through the window and all of this stuff. I kind of got a late start on things today. But nonetheless, we are here, and today I want to talk to you about scenario design. Before we do that, a quick little update. The K22 system is ready to go. There'll probably be some additional edits. I've got a few rule edits that I am supposed to be making, and they're just minor ticky-tack things. And I'm not likely to make a whole lot of major changes or edits at this point. Anything that I add to it will probably be some kind of an add-on thing or a tool or a teaching aid or something. What you're looking at on the screen is the official module, and I've cleaned up the module quite a bit. So we have our memes still, and we call our morale die or a moral die. Uh, because people kept spelling morale moral, and so I thought it would be cute to create something like that. Anyway, that's just for fun. But the maps and everything are here, the pieces are here, the dice are all done and created. I have a combat results chart, I have the building units cheat sheet here, and Cavalry Rules Aid has all been updated. And then once you have the rules and you put all that together, I think you're ready to go to run, which should be a really fun game. Real quick, I want to say good morning to Achilles, who's in the live stream. Good to see you there, Achilles. And again, anybody who's watching, feel free to tune in, drop questions, and I will do my best to answer them. So, I want to talk a little bit about scenario design. And part of this is inspired because yesterday I played a game from a really good designer. His name is Justin and goes by the name Crises. And he plays out of Australia. And he's run several events and he's done a couple of scenarios that I thought were really, really well designed. And he ran a scenario yesterday, and as usual, I got my hat handed to me by everyone. It was me and a friend of mine who were playing against, I think, five other players, and it was sort of this European type scenario, or versus indigenous type scenario, and I think we were on map 14. Yeah. So he took this map and he actually had colored this in blue on the master map. So this was ocean, and this here kind of represented an island in the Caribbean. And I had my forces out here, and the indigenous tribes folk had their forces. So I'll just show you real quick. So I had some units here. I had some scouts out wherever, all over. I had some additional units here, and then the bad guys, meaning the indigenous folk, were coming from this direction, and that was my initial scenario. So what we did was we decided, well, hey, let's concentrate here. If I can get that to work, let's concentrate here, and then I'll ride out with my cavalry, and then I will outflank and destroy this column between us. With my friend here being the anvil right here on this relatively treacherous ground right here, and me being the hammer, probably coming up this way or this way. I didn't want to be in this gully. That's pretty dangerous terrain, and that was the idea. The problem, of course, is the bad guys were coming from all directions. I had some additional forces here that I either wasn't aware of or I forgot about them or whatever, but I didn't know. And I had baddies coming in everywhere. And the end result is they surrounded us and crushed us while my cavalry was out here. So I myself escaped, but my subordinate and the army that he commanded was completely destroyed there. So, and that made me think about scenario design because this was one of those scenarios where it was really hard for me to win, you know? Um, and as my friend pointed out, the path to victory was quite narrow. It was probably possible for us to win, but given just the sheer size of the forces on both sides, or the size of the force against us, it was probably going to be really, really hard. Like, we would have had to play like geniuses. And last time I checked, I'm not quite genius level. So I was not up to the task, whereas the opposition simply had to just concentrate and smash, which they did very well, and it can be hard when you have a lot of players. One of the liabilities that you can sometimes have in Kriegsspiel is to have too many players on a team, and then it's like herding cats, getting them all to coordinate. Well, they coordinated well enough. And so there you have it. Um, so this kind of brings up the question: how do you design a scenario for Kriegspiel? What should there be some kind of general rules or some standards? How do you do all of this? And the answer is yes. And I believe in the original Kriegspiel materials that I recall reading quite some time ago now. I should probably go back and revisit them. But they talk about how, the scenario should be relatively balanced. You have a thing called the general idea, which is kind of, here's kind of what's going on around you, or this is the overall aim or objective or the purpose of your campaign. And here's kind of the enemy, here's you, and so on. And the idea is the players are put into a situation and they've got some basic problems to solve, but it's very possible for both of them to solve their problems. And it's not so much about who defeats who, it's about how you tackle the problems that are presented to you. In fact, a lot of times the games might end at what point the actual main battle starts. And that illustrates something that's really important in warfare, that a lot of battles are actually decided before the combat even begins, because it's all about the maneuver. It's about the strategies and the choices that you make prior to the start of the battle. So if I go back to yesterday's battle, I made a choice to defend this position here, because I'm like, well, that's some good ground up there. We got high ground. We can put some artillery there. There's this gully here. The enemy's going to have to come through that to get to us. They're going to be badly disrupted when doing so. And then if I have my cavalry out here and I swing around behind the baddies, then, not only do I force them to defend in two directions, or to fight this direction and defend the rear, I'm splitting their attention. I'm making it so that they can't concentrate all their force at this point, and it buys time. It's basically, I have all these ideas about how this is supposed to work, and that's a great idea if I'm only fighting one column. But of course, I was fighting multiple columns from multiple directions. But yeah, that was the thinking. And the thing is, my thinking was an error, because I had scouts out here and I wasn't quite clear, and I've got excuses for this, but I'm not going to argue them here. But I had scouts out here and I pulled all those scouts in because really I was just trying to get control of my force and find out what the heck was going on. And how do you find out what's going on? Well, you get reports from scouts, right? So by pulling in all my scouts, I simply blinded myself. And I thought, well, there's just this big column coming this way. That's all I have to worry about. And I proceeded with a plan to worry about that. So my plan against this column was great, and it actually worked pretty well. But, there's all this other bad stuff coming in. So that tells you how the decisions I made even before the battle was joined cost the battle. And that's really important, and that's really what Kriegsspiel tests. Is it puts you in this situation, it runs the situation for a little bit, it kind of develops, and then you're like, well, what do you do? At what point do I say, well, hey, wait a minute, maybe I need to reevaluate my tactics here, because I'm now getting reports that there's units to the south, units to the north. Maybe we're being surrounded, and all my attention is being focused here. And of course, I made another erroneous assumption, which is that this force here was sufficient in terms of size, strength, and technological ability that they could hold out while I pushed to here, and then we could, kind of do the round, go around it and clean up, or do something. But I was already committed to this plan. Again, a commitment that I made by the first or second turn of the game, and I did not alter my plan when I should have. So that's kind of how Kriegsspiel works. So let's talk about this. So first of all, um, should a scenario be winnable? And in the original Kriegsspiel, they're like, yeah, you really do have to create a scenario that's kind of balanced. And I get it, losing a scenario, especially when you have your pride wrapped up like me, it hurts. It's painful. And it hurts even more when you find out that the scenario you were in probably did have a pretty narrow path to victory, and that unless you were straight up Napoleon, you probably weren't going to crack the case. Ah, bummer. And I feel like that happens to me a lot, but I've also noticed the common denominator in all my Kriegsspiel problems is me. So take that with a grain of salt. I do think that yes, scenarios should be winnable by both sides, but there are cases where you want to create like a rearguard action or a situation where one side or the other cannot or isn't going to win. Because that happens in war, and your officers need to be able to handle that situation. What do you do if you are the rear guard? You're absolutely going to get crushed. There's no question. So you're going to lose the battle, at least as far as you're concerned. So what do you do for them? And the thing is you create the situation, and most gamers are familiar with this, right? It's like when you play a World War II game and you're playing as Germany. It's really a foregone conclusion that eventually the weight of the Allied forces coming from two directions is going to smash you, as they should and will. But how do you get the German player to play? Who would ever want to play the Germans if all you're going to do is be a punching bag and you're going to get knocked over and you lose? And what you do is you say, well, if you outperform the historic German army or whatever, then that's counted as a win. So if you hold out past early May of 1945, then your side is actually declared the winner, even though inevitably you're going to be crushed. So I think there has to be some kind of a system like that in there so that the players don't feel like they're just being stood up as a punching bag for everyone else. Alternatively, if you do want a punching bag scenario, let the players who are being the punching bag know that they are the punching bag and that there's no way you're going to win and you're not here to win, you're here to lose. It's like gambling in Las Vegas. They're pretty upfront about that there. Hey, the odds are in our favor, you're not going to win. And the longer you play, the more you're just going to lose. And so people can't be blamed, or the casinos can't be blamed when you play and you lose your bankroll. And likewise in Kriegsspiel. If both sides walk into a scenario thinking, hey, I have a 50-50 chance of winning at least, um, then they're going to be set up for a real disappointment. Now, why is that a problem? Well, first of all, that's not a problem if you're using it as a training exercise, because that's reality. And it's not about feelings, it's about learning the skills that you need to learn to be an effective commander. But if you're playing with friends and you want your friends to come back and play again and again, then you have to kind of manage expectations. And you have to say, look, you're in a situation where you're probably not going to win. It's really a question of how long can you hold out. And if you hold out past, let's say, turn 8, turn 12, whatever, then we're going to consider that, hey, you did well, you did good, you did great, you did genius, whatever. There's sort of this level of victory that you can attain, and it's really just how long can you hold out. And that makes it fun for both sides. And there's no like, oh, really? I lost? Oh, it was unwinnable? Oh, the path to victory was about as narrow as that? Oh, man. You know, none of that, none of those feelings get thrown in there. So I think it's important to manage the expectations of the players. Let's take a look real quick at the comments. Hi, Heinz says, Marshall having an "Are we the baddies?" moment. That is a great reference to a fantastic, I want to say Key and Peele, and that's not it. It's Mitchell and Webb. They're a UK comedy duo. I don't even know if they're still active, but they were active in the last decade. They made this great sketch where they were a couple of German SS officers on the Eastern Front, and they're getting defeated. And one says to the other, "Are we the baddies? We've got skulls on our caps." They realize they're the bad guys in this scenario. Anyway, it's a great sketch. But yeah, and in yesterday's scenario, we absolutely were the baddies. We were invading the indigenous lands and trying to subjugate the indigenous peoples. Absolutely, we were there as the conquistadors. So Achilles says winning is so relative, which it is, right? You could even have a scenario where both sides win. There's this cool little thing. One time, I learned about this when I was in Cancun. I went on this little dinner cruise, and you go out on this little, it's like a pirate ship dinner cruise, and the cast is performing while you're eating your dinner, and they're telling you this story about how the bad guys stole his girlfriend or wife or whatever, right? The pirate captain's girlfriend or whatever, and he was on a mission to get her back. And uh, about the time dinner's finishing up, here's this other pirate ship comes along, and there's a battle between the two pirate ships, and there's a boarding that takes place, and the captain gets his woman back. But if you're paying attention, uh, while the woman is being transferred to one pirate ship, there's a box, a chest, a treasure chest being transferred to the other. So the guests on the second ship are told, "Oh, he stole my treasure." And then at the end, both ships kind of part and go back to port, and everybody feels like their side won the pirate battle, right? Because you got something that you wanted. You can create a scenario that's also the same way. Like, our objective is to do this, and the other side, their objective is to do that. And the important thing, though, is you have to make sure there's enough friction between the two sides so that, one side or the other side can interfere to some degree with another because you have to create problems for the players to solve. And you're going to create what I call, the standard issue problems. Here are your problems. But then you create what are called organic problems, and that's what I call them. And they're the problems that kind of arise from normal operations in the presence of the enemy all up in your business. Those are organic problems that naturally arise, and you want to see how the player performs and solves those problems. And I think that's pretty important too. So you have to make sure there's enough friction or conflict between the two sides, and it can be absolutely asymmetrical. So one side is trying to capture this location here, and the other side is trying to capture this location here, and they're going to come around like this, and they're going to come around like this, but there has to be something in the middle that gets them to mix it up. So you kind of have to do that. So let's talk a little bit more. Hang on here. Peter says, "Sorry, Marshall, I would join you for a chin wag, but a bit busy. Question for you: How did you find fighting melee only infantry?" Uh, I commanded a cavalry force, Peter, and I found it very easy to ride them down and destroy them based on the attributes of that force. On the other hand, my friend who was commanding regular infantry versus melee infantry found them quite terrifying. While they were easy to kill, because they came up in very large numbers, they simply overwhelmed and overran the force. Um, I don't know what system was used. I know that disruption markers were being used in the game, but I also noticed that indigenous blocks did not get removed from the game, or at least I didn't see that they were being removed. So again, I don't know what the system is, but if you have a certain battle, like there are scenarios like, if you were doing Pizarro versus the Incas, well, a lot of the Incas were slaughtered when he captured Atahualpa, and if you're representing that on a with blocks, you need to be pulling blocks off. Um, and one of the problems with some of our older standard Kriegsspiel system is blocks they're not removed. Even in the K22 system, it takes a bit of effort to get a block eliminated from the map. And if that's the case, then the side with the most blocks is going to have an inherent kind of weight advantage or an inertia advantage once they get rolling, and then you're going to be in a lot of trouble. And that's actually kind of what happened to us. Is once the enemy was able to kind of organize and get their attack rolling, they were pretty much irresistible at that point. So that's how I found it. I do think the battle worked. I really do. I really think it accurately modeled everything that they were trying to do. Like, again, this was another masterpiece from Justin. The only problem was my expectations were not managed, but that's a me problem, not a Justin problem so much. but I really do think it was a masterpiece of a battle because you have these Europeans, right, who are behaving and fighting with the European mindset against indigenous people who are fighting with an indigenous mindset. And it just so happens that the indigenous players managed to sort themselves out and coordinate an attack. And once that happened, the European tactics were useless against the human waves of indigenous attackers coming from all directions. Where I was able to manage the flow of the attack or manage the fight, if you will, I was able to dominate and do very well. But because I was unable to do that around the map, sorry, I'm doing two different things at once. But yeah, where I was able to, here we go. This is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to, so you're not just looking at a blank map. You can at least look me in the eye, kind of. Yeah, where I was able to control the conditions of the engagement, I did very well. But otherwise, no, I did very poorly, which of course is true in any kind of battle. Um, all right, let's take a look here at. I messed up my YouTube stream by clicking the wrong thing, though. But Hines says the blocks we used actually had visible broken states and shattered states where the block literally dissolved. I did see like there's a couple of those on there, but I don't know if the blocks are actually removed or what. But again, I didn't have the umpire table. I only saw the end state of the umpire table, so I don't know. From my perspective, I did not see blocks get removed. I did see them get broken. I did not see shattered units until I came to the umpire table and saw those on there. But it does not matter. It does not matter. The scenario worked very, very, very well. So I think it's another masterpiece, and I was privileged to play in it. Some tips for scenario design can be found from the UK group. They have here this here scenarios for Kriegsspiel. Let me make sure you can see this. I need to do minimize my head. Actually, I can just turn my face off. There we go. So this here is kriegspielorg.wordpress.com. And one of the guys from the UK put this together. This is actually by Bill Leeson himself. And Bill Leeson is the guy who gave us these maps. You know, literally this map right here that you're looking at was not this one. But the maps that we play on that are sold by Two Fat Lardies, like this map. This is my favorite map. Bill Leeson actually colorized this map. He's the guy who did all of this work, translated the original rules into English from the original German. So let's go back here. So here is what he wrote, and he talked about the types of scenarios and the general idea. You need to have a general idea. Here's kind of what's going on out there. You need a report for red and a report for blue. You need an order of battle. You need an order of march. We typically let the players choose these or work these out. We might give them an order of battle, but we let them choose the order of march, whatever. They get a kind of a detailed situation, or what I call the initial report, and then we kind of rock and roll. So this is typically how we do it. We follow this very, very closely. Um, but here is just something that you can read through that's available online, again, at Kriegsspiel.org WordPress. And the idea is it gives you some tips for how to create scenarios. So what I like to do with scenarios is I like to basically, my favorite kind of scenario is a meeting engagement. I'll pick something right here. Prael has been fought over many times. I also like these two hills here because they're kind of strategic locations. And I like to keep the battles kind of small rather than massive and huge, and that's really important. So first you choose an objective, and then you set out the order of battle for each side. Or in K22, the players actually get to pick their own units. They get to literally buy and decide. Here's what I want. I want infantry, I want cavalry, and here's what I want in the unit. Um, they get to choose that, and then that's what they're going to bring to the table. And they don't always know what the objective is when they build their units. I actually tell them that afterwards to simulate, hey, you've got to go to war with what you have, not necessarily with what you want. And then I set an objective for them. And then I set them up on the map. And it's very important, again, don't give them too much stuff. Because if you give them too much stuff, then it will take a long time to process their turns. So you can set them up on the map wherever. And one of the things that you want to do is you want to make sure that both of them will arrive at the objective by, following a standard route, in other words, following these roads, that they'll arrive close to the objective at about the same time. If one side arrives at the objective before the other, and I made this mistake myself, I had one unit get here in my last test game, and they got there about 10 minutes before the other side did, so they were able to occupy this fortified position, and the other unit was kind of helpless. And they had a lot of cavalry, which is useless against this. And that was a problem. And that goes back, again, it's an error with the scenario design. The outcome of the battle was quite predictable. It was essentially determined by that. So you want to be careful when crafting your scenario that you want to count spaces or distance and make sure that both sides kind of get there about the same time. The purpose of an objective is really just to give them something to fight over. The objective itself is kind of secondary. It's really just about getting them to kind of go at each other so they arrive at the same location on the map at about the same time. Basically gets them to the battlefield. And then they do their fighting, which is the fun for them, and then it's over. And that's what you want to do. Again, no more than maybe 6 elements to command, because anytime they're commanding more than 6 elements, the players start splitting blocks off and saying, well, I want one unit to go over here and one unit to go over here. Plus, it takes longer to process their orders, process their turn, and all of that. So I think about 6 elements that they can command should be the maximum. They shouldn't be ordering around more than 6. I think 4 is kind of on the low end, but I got to tell you, I've had a lot of fun commanding just 1 or 2 blocks. So don't assume that you have to have a lot of different blocks for the player to control, for the player to have fun. You can have incredible fun with just a few blocks. In fact, again, going back to this scenario, my friend up here on the hill, he had about a dozen blocks, and I only had like 4, and it was still just as fun for all of us to play. I had a great time. So yeah, don't give the players a whole lot of blocks. Don't worry about that. They don't need a whole lot to have fun. And again, manage their expectations. So if you're creating kind of a rear guard, or it's you versus the Mongol hordes or whatever it may be, make sure that you manage the player expectations. Not particularly important if you're playing at Army University or something, but it's particularly important if you're playing just with friends. Not necessarily me. I'm an old Kriegsspiel veteran. It's no big deal to me. But to people who are new to the hobby or new to the game or who are playing casually, you don't want them to have a bad experience. So that's very important because, again, you want players to come back. So one of the things that you have to consider when you design and run scenarios is who is actually playing? What is their attitude like? And do I want them to come back and play this game again? Even if they're going to be on a losing side, you have to make sure that they feel really good. And then finally, at the end, we do the critique, and it's very important that when you do a critique, you say something very positive about the players. Avoid negative commentary. Now, again, if you're using this as an instructional aid or tool, and you are, actually teaching military officers, absolutely give it to them straight. Don't pull punches. You did not take the high ground or the ground that you needed to take. You messed up. You're a loser. You need to do better next time. Don't do that again. On the other hand, when playing with your friends or even with strangers, let's say you're at a convention and strangers are signed up to play, Again, you want to be very positive and say, you did a really good job trying to sort your things out. You know, maybe your scouting reports weren't what you expected, whatever. But don't put it all on them, and let them feel good about themselves. Even if you kind of have to reach really deep into that hat to pull out a compliment, find something and pull out a compliment. Your orders were the most beautifully written and formatted orders I've ever seen. Or the way in which, you managed to hold off the enemy from overrunning you for a full 2 turns, whatever it may be. Make sure that they feel positive and they want to come back and play again, because that's the future of the hobby. All right, one more look at the YouTube before we wrap up. Let's see here. I do want to thank you all for being here. We do have a bunch of comments. So let's take a look here. Hines telling lies, I'm sure. As an umpire in that game, there were a couple of routes to victory for Marshall's team. See, lies. There is no route to victory, because if there was, I would have won. Let's finish his comment. He says, but it was a narrow series of paths, and that's what my friend observed. Um, and both teams got briefings that would lead them to overconfidence. Yes, I definitely felt overconfident. And I kind of knew that I was being a little overconfident, but I was like, you know what, let's kind of ham it up, because that's what my character would do. So I was kind of playing in some kind of character there. A little bit of role play is always part of it. Role playing is actually a descendant of Kriegsspiel, and so it's part of the game. And yeah, absolutely, I totally agree with Heinz here. He's absolutely correct on everything. I get it there. Achilles says it looks like it ended up like Isla Wanda. It absolutely did. And Heinz says pretty close. One hard thing in Kriegsspiel is taking history grognards and trying to set up a battle so that their vast knowledge of the time period doesn't artificially influence the battle. That's a great tip, and that is one of the reasons why we're playing a red versus blue campaign in our Kriegsspiel rather than France or Napoleon versus the coalition or whatever. Because we don't want players to be informed by history. We want players to play based on the knowledge that we give them and not be informed by historical events and circumstances. It's also important with your maps that your maps not have markings on them. So if you're doing a battlefield, you don't want all these markings on them. Let's see if I can find one of our Civil War maps. Some of the Civil War maps sometimes will have markings on them that show where the troops are positioned, and if that happens, you need to clean that up, because if the players see those positions, it will inform their play, and you don't want to copy that. Let's see here. Achilles says, yes, that would be a problem. Well, a musket in 1814 with X grams of powder per cartridge will fire X number of yards. Yeah, we absolutely don't want that happening. And the problem is, in every Kriegsspiel, you're going to have that one guy. You're going to have that one guy who's an expert on the battle, who's an expert on the tactics, or the expert on the firearms or whatever, and they're going to go at you endlessly. And they're like, well, I should have a die roll modifier because these muskets had an extra 50 yards range or something like that. And you know what? They'll be right. But you don't have time to deal with that. So the way to solve that problem when designing your scenarios is make absolutely everything fictional. You can be informed and inspired by history, but you absolutely want to make everything fictional. So that way you don't have to deal with that guy. All right, I was pulling up some of our Civil War maps to illustrate how important it is to clean them up. Here's a map of the battlefield of Antietam, and again, it's a cleaned up map. There's no markings on it. I wanted you to see that. So there you go. All right, folks, that's what I've got today. I do want to let people know that my subscribers on Patreon this month, whoever is subscribed as of this month, they're going to be getting a free copy of the K22 rule set. I have distributed some copies of the K22 rule set for the purpose of kind of testing, and I've asked the people who are looking at them, if you happen to be one of those people, please give those rules a look and give me feedback on the rules, anything that you think should be tweaked, changed, or adjusted. But I'm basically at the point where I'm ready to publish them. I do have some copies out to a couple publishers. I do have one publisher who says, yes, I'll publish it, but I'm kind of shopping around, and I may self-publish the rules. And if I self-publish them, they will be sold, and the exact price has not yet been set. But again, for those of you who are on Patreon, I'm going to make sure that you have a free copy of these rules. The module itself, the K22 module, is free and it is available in the workshop for Tabletop Simulator. So please, absolutely go on there, get the module, and it'll look just like this. This is the module, and you'll be able to play with it. But you don't have the rules. You need to get the rules. I put a lot of work into developing those rules, so I want to generate a little bit of income for myself and to support the IKS. And so I want to encourage you folks to do that. So please, if you're interested, feel free to subscribe to the Patreon. And again, those rules will be coming out pretty soon to the Patreon subscribers, pretty early this month, as soon as I can. I'm just waiting to hear back from one or two people before I can do that, and I should have that within the week. So there you go. That's the time frame. And I hope you enjoy the system. And thank you for watching the show. And we will see you on the next adventure. Take care and goodbye for now.